All right, so this is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Duke Dewey for the first time. This interview is taking place in Columbus, Georgia on September the 10th, 2022. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. So how are you doing today, Duke?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
All right, let's start off with some basic stuff. So when were you born?
June 12, 1936.
All right, and where were you born?
I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about your hometown. What is it like?
I wouldn't have any idea. I was born into a family that were vaudeville people, and I was what they call a trunk baby. I was a backstage. They traveled all over, played theaters all over the Northeast and all the way out to Detroit and all over the place. Pretty much like a gypsies, just going one place to the other. So until my dad died in 1942, or 41, 42, just before the war started, and from then on, the only places I ever stayed at one time was I was in an orphanage for 4 years because my mother was a showgirl in New York, and I just didn't fit at that particular time in her life. She needed a kid for herself. And no place in general. The longest I've spent in any one place would have been right in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Well, I can't take, Fort Bragg. And later on, after I got out of the Army, I lived 10 years in Georgia, and I live in Vermont. That's where 40 years in Vermont. I taught at Norwich University. So.
Okay. And do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I got one sister and two stepsisters. I don't know where they are. I know my stepsister, my sister, she's living in Massachusetts, but the two people that, the other two girls, I have no idea. One died some years back, and the other one was living in Rhode Island. That's never had much to do with family, so.
Okay. And so during all this traveling, where did you go to school?
I went to, like I said, I was in a 4-year, I was in an orphanage for 4 years, and I was raised by the Xavier brothers, the same people, by the way, that it was the same schools that Babe Ruth was in. He was in Maryland, and I was in Newton, Massachusetts. And then after that, I got out of there, and I bummed around. I stayed in Newton High School for a whole week. And I went to Ladies of Newton. I stayed there for about a half a year. Right after hockey season, I cut out of there. And then next thing I know, got me a job, quit school, got a job. I was doing glass, the commercial glass. And, well, let me think. I just hung around. I worked for this guy, and then later on after that, I went to Mount St. Charles and Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and I played hockey there, and then the Korean War busted out, and then I figured, well, there must be some excitement there, so I joined the Army. So.
Okay. Did you graduate from high school?
No.
All right.
GED.
Okay. So I heard hockey a couple times, so that was a passion of yours? You liked hockey?
Yeah. I really like playing hockey, so.
All right. You still follow hockey today?
No, believe it or not, I lost my interest in it. I'm also a baseball player. I follow the baseball. I don't do pro football because I don't particularly like them. After what they did a couple last year, I don't get political. When they get political, I don't watch them anymore. So.
Okay. What about hobbies? You have any hobbies?
Well, not particularly. No, not anything you could say I was a hobby. I collected stamps, collected coins and stuff like that, but that's nothing serious.
All right. And so Korean War takes place, you decide to join the military, so you enlisted?
Yep, enlisted. Join the Rangers. but the Rangers had been disbanded. And so they said there's this organization called Special Forces. They figured it was just like it, so would I try that? I said, sure. So I went to Special Forces. And it was, then I stayed with them, and then I went to Korea. I was with the 24th Infantry Division, 21st Infantry Regiment. And I stayed with them over there. And then when I came back, I re-enlisted to go right straight to Germany. And I went to Germany, and I went to the 10th Special Forces in Germany, in Bad Tölz, Germany. So, and I stayed 4 years there. I left there in '61. And I come out of there and went to the 82nd Airborne Division, and which was the 503rd. They were battle groups in those days. They didn't have the brigades and all that sort of thing. So then, let me think. I stayed in the 503rd, then all of a sudden, a friend of mine from Special Forces come by, an old man, great guy named Colonel Caravori. He was a Finn, and he said, I need some people who are the old timers. I need people because all the new people, we were going to Vietnam in those days. And so that was '62. And then I turned around, ended up, went to Vietnam in '63 with an A team. Went with them, come back, and then I stayed in the 5th group, not the 5th group, but the 7th group. Now it's very confusing in here because I'm jumping over individual organizations. I was in the 77th Special Forces, which the 10th had just left Germany, not Germany, but the United States. We came in and closed in behind them. They were still deploying when I got into the Special Forces in Fort Bragg. That was, and I left there because we weren't what they would call the nicest people in the Army, according to the chairman of the staff. They really, it was a good dumping ground for a lot of officers, but those officers were brilliant. But they just didn't fit in with the social groups, I guess. And it was strange. It was a strange situation. So getting back, I was in the 503rd. I stayed with them, went back to the 7th Special Forces Group. I was deployed to Vietnam in '63 and come back in '64. And I stayed with the 7th till around '65. I left there, and the Dominican Republic started. The Dominican Republic, I went back to the 1st of the 505, and I stayed with the 82nd from that point all the way out till I come back from with General Bolling, the 3rd Brigade, and I deployed back to the United States. And I went to Norwich University as an instructor, ROTC instructor. I instructed mountain military tactics, skiing, climbing, and all of that sort of stuff. So stayed there till 60. Let me see. I stayed at 72 and went back to Vietnam again. And I stayed there till '73 with the end of the war. I went over to Thailand, went to JCRC, Joint Casualty Resolution, with Special Forces. We went back looking for the MIAs in Vietnam. And then I got sort of sidetracked a little bit, and there was a lot of things that happened over there that shouldn't. And I went back and I got deployed back to the United States, the 10th Group in Devens, Massachusetts. And then I just turned around and up and retired. That was it. So that was my, like a nutshell, but it isn't a nutshell. It gets real drawn out and a lot of drama, and a whole bunch of other things in there. So, but the best time I had in any time would be with this 3rd Brigade. This was a good brigade, and had good commanders, a lot of good officers, a lot of good enlisted, and we stuck together like glue. So, and we were probably the best unit in Vietnam until the Chief of Staff decided to try an experiment by some of the other divisions in Vietnam didn't have, they weren't doing what they were supposed to do and all that, so they broke up part of our unit and started sending paratroopers in to see if they could get, to get these people moving over there. And that was a disaster. They took this unit apart to do that. But we stayed, and when we got replacements and all that, we trained them, and we made sure that they did well. Even the guys that weren't paratroopers, they did just as good as anybody else. And turned out, I came back, and the general left, and he went up to chief. He was chief of staff of the 25th Corps, and that would be. Let me see, that would have been 1969. I came back to the United States, and I was supposed to go to the Ranger Department as a mountain instructor down in Bolling, Georgia. And all of a sudden I got a call saying, you go to Norwich University in Vermont. That's how because I was a mountain instructor. So I ended up, that's where I went. And it was an ideal place. Nice small town, college town, nice place to raise kids. I had one more daughter there, and I'm my first and last daughter. Oh, God bless them. And I turned around and I said, okay, and I stayed there, and the next thing I know, I'm back in Vietnam. I told you that already. I went back to Vietnam in '72. I got some good friends somewhere in, in the deployment department, I made enemies along the way. And like I said, in '74, I said, adios. I want no more to do with this. And I got out. And then I got into civilian life. I was a sheriff. I was Chief Deputy Sheriff of Washington County in Vermont. And then I wasn't too happy doing that stuff. That wasn't one of my things. And next thing you know, an old colonel I knew that worked at Norwich said, would you be interested in working for us? We have a company up in Canada that we're working for. And I said, sure, they made and developed artillery. And I worked for them till everybody went to jail. Oh yeah, they put them all in jail. They were selling to the wrong people. Actually, it was sort of, it was not the wrong people, they were selling to the South Africans. And Jimmy Carter was president, and he was briefed every day on our position with the CIA. CIA are the ones that hired us. And we had one of the finest artillery pieces in the world, and it still is. And it was exciting because then you get into the intrigue, and I spent more time traveling with the president of the company and with the groups, showing, displaying everything. I went 27 countries and all over the world. It was exciting and it was different, and the money was good, and I was involved in some of the sales, and we sold Thailand. We sold Thailand. What was it? $260 million worth of artillery. There's one artillery battery and a couple 100,000 rounds of ammunition. The development of the ammunition was done by a guy named Dr. Bull. There was Space Research Corporation. He was brilliant. He was maybe 10, 15 years way beyond us. He developed an artillery piece, 155 millimeter, that would fire 38 kilometers and come down within 90 meters of where it was called. It was unheard of. He did a lot of, what his thing was, he was down in Barbados, and he was shooting small payload satellites into space with a cannon instead of going up with a rocket. So he could do it at El Cheapo, put it right up in there. That didn't work well with NASA, So I don't know, you know, they got, like I said, got very intriguing. And after that, I went back to work for Norwich. They were, the government closed, like the company. And I went back to work for Norwich. I stayed around Norwich for a while. Then I got the position of assistant commandant, a cadets there at Norwich. By the way, Norwich is a military school, a military college, put it that way. Probably one of the best in the world. It was private. And I stayed there and worked for a gentleman. The guy I knew was a guy named, he was an ex-SF lieutenant colonel and major. He was an SF and major, and then he got out and went over Germany and he became a colonel. Come back, he took over commandant of cadets, and he hired me as assistant commandant because they were having a little bit of problem there, and they needed somebody with a little bit more discipline than I was a disciplinarian, and I did a lot of things there that they needed to be done, and it turned out well. And then I left there, and I went in private business. I had a private detective agency. I did a lot of other stuff. And some of the stuff, that's why I say it's very hard to interview me, because some of the stuff I can't speak about. So, but what else do you want to know?
Well, the dates of your military service again are what?
Would have been, let me see, October, like joined Special Forces October 1954, and I got out of the Army at 10th Special Forces Group in 1974, 20 years there. But also, I went over, somebody talked me into going into the New York Guard. They needed a survival school and a rescue, mountain rescue school. And I made a deal with the governor of the state of New York for a commission. They commissioned me as a lieutenant colonel, and I set up a school and all that. And then all of a sudden, the division people stopped. You know, the governor changed, and when he changed, I changed, and they did something else with the organization that they had. That's a New York Guard. I was a lieutenant colonel in the New York Guard. So, and let me see. And then after that, I did jobs here and there, and I trained state troopers, I trained FBI agents. I was a Berlin cop in Vermont, and a lot of other things. I used to arrange fishing trips for the people at Norwich, you know, the faculty and staff. Take them to the ocean and let them fish the ocean, watch them get sick. Well, anyway, I'm not a very interesting person, but
I'm sure you are.
I'm trying to get it, fire in my brain. You gotta watch out. I gotta skip over things, so I be careful what I say. The FBI people, when the same is, it's sort of it's funny. I turn around, and the FBI people I trained from Boston, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut, the three, they were SWAT teams, and they set them up for the Olympics at New York, over Lake Placid. That was the first group. Then the second group we trained, we went to the Olympics in, they had them in LA, but they had the soccer games in Massachusetts. So the Massachusetts, the FBI office in Boston, plus the Connecticut people, we put a group together and we taught them, and set them up where they could launch if something happened. They used Harvard Stadium for the soccer games. So, and they had no idea. It surprised me because they didn't have any idea of all the underground tunnels between the buildings and in Harvard University, and they never. They didn't even know about them until we got in there and we talked to them. I did that for a while. Trained cops in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, the SWAT teams, Maine. But it was a good business. I worked for a guy. He was one of my cadets. He's a talking head for Fox. A guy named Colonel David Hunt. That's who I worked. He was running the thing. And he paid me well, and I didn't care. And, you know, we had my kids were getting up in age then. Both boys, they both went in the Army, so one went into the 504th in the 82nd, the other one went to 101st, and it didn't work out well. I told him he wasn't going to like Fort Campbell, but he didn't listen, and he got killed there, so that was the oldest boy. He was something else. And then my daughter, she got married, and my wife and I, we lived in the Caribbean for 3 years in Antigua, and our big thing was we were going to retire and again and buy a nice motor sailor, and we were going to live on board. You know, that was going to be till my daughter got married, and then that first grandbaby came, and that my dream was gone. The boat was gone, the dream was gone. I had to go get a bloody job. So that's when I became a Berlin cop. You got me in a nutshell right there.
Okay. And what was your highest rank in the military?
Well, Sergeant First Class, E7.
All right. And in terms of, you mentioned a lot of different theaters. So starting with Korea, you deployed over there. What did you end up doing, and with whom? Okay,
I was in the 21st Civil Regiment, of the 24th Division. I was assigned to up there in the DMZ with the DMZ Police Company. And I stayed up there for a while. Then I moved back to the rear. And then they moved me into a communications bunker on top of a mountain. It was a relay station. And all we had to do was change batteries, me and another guy. And that's where we stayed, on top of a mountain. And we stayed there for, I guess about maybe a year. Not even a year. 7 months. We stayed up on top of that mountain. And we used to get resupplied about once every 2 weeks, I think it was. A helicopter would land up on a pad up there, and they would give us our food. We cooked our own food. We lived up there, and that's where we stayed.
It was just the two of you?
Just me and the other guy, yeah. Yeah, that's me and the other guy.
And any kind of combat in Korea?
No. Well, yeah. Everybody said the war was over, but I'm going to tell you what, it wasn't over. And we every so often you get people who get. When I first got to Korea, I had a 3 Special Forces qualification, but it was classified and nobody knew what it was. But they knew it was something to do with secret stuff that we were doing. And what they did was they put me in the military police investigation systems at ICOR. And I said, I absolutely know nothing about, but I ran into a lot of my friends from Special Forces. Let me back up a little bit. The reason I was in Korea is because the Department of the Army decided that the 77th was too big. We had no budget. They had nothing, even though no matter how well you were trained and, what you did, they decided to cut that thing about maybe 700, 800 troops, and they sent us all to Korea. Because we were all trained and everything. And so we went to Korea. Now the Special Forces, and they put us in the infantry divisions and all that stuff there. And I worked over there for a while as an MP, and that's not one of my things. I had the pleasure of working. I didn't really like what I was doing. We were just below the MGM River, and we were above the military, what they call it, civilian military department line. No civilians could live up there, but they couldn't build anything up there. And we would go down, if they built houses, we'd go down there and take the house. I didn't like doing it, and the colonel I was working for, he didn't like it doing it either, but that was the rules. You couldn't let them move up over the line, because we were still in a wartime. Right now, Korea, all it is a ceasefire. There's no course, I don't know which side sees fires more than the other, but it got really wild. Well, we were in Vietnam. Korea got just almost started a war again in there, but that was because of the world situation. So, but we stayed in there. Then somebody said, "How would you like to take care of a combo unit after I come back from the DMZ police?" I said, "Yeah, I'll go." So I went up on the mountain, me and a guy named Bailey. He was a piece of work, that guy. he was also Special Forces. There was a bunch of us over there. And we all started running into each other. And some guys I knew in my company. I was in a company in Special Forces that was a very active company. Well, you probably heard us talking out there the other night. I know Jim Bolling a long time, so. And there was just a lot of things that, I was Peck's bad boy. I could get in trouble in a heartbeat. And, but then, then I met a guy named Alexander Bolling. I tell you what, I met him, and next thing you know, for some bloody reason, he said to me, he used to confide in me. He'd say, "Well, what do you think about this?" I mean, not tactical-wise, but, some things that were going on. We carried M1 rifles until a month before we deployed to Vietnam, and they finally gave us M16s. And because they said the division was the 82nd was not going to be deployed, as a division anywhere, as America's guard of honor. And they never bothered changing us, giving weapons, the new weapons and everything. Then finally, when they did, we deployed to Vietnam out of Fort Bragg. Yeah, that was exciting. Let me think.
Well, you've been talking about Colonel Bolling, right?
Yeah.
All right. And what was because I think you had a little bit of a deeper relationship with Colonel Bolling than you've told me so far. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, he was, we used to go and he would be talking about, he was telling me one day, he says, "Let's take a walk," and we're walking down the street. He says, "I think I'm going to have to retire." I don't know why the hell you would ever talk to me, And I said, "Well, of course, I a little bit of, sort of a personality thing. I could mix with anybody." And he said, I said, "What the hell are you going to retire for? Your father was a lieutenant general. He was a Third Army commander. You were under he fought with his father in a division in the Second World War on the invasion of Normandy, and he got captured there. But anyway, getting back to this, we just became friends, and I was like a friend. Some general officers, they don't have friends. They have friends, but they're other officers. But and I watched out for him. He was a good guy. He was a really, really great commander. He took care of his troops, and you find that sometimes you get good commanders that do that, and because there were some situations that he grabbed by hand, and with some of the troops, there was a guy that had we had what they call MPC. You familiar with that? Military payment scripts. They used to all of a sudden restrict everybody in place, and they changed all the money. And that was to cut down the black market and stuff there. But we had guys that were in the field, and they didn't have no chance to change their money. So one day a young man he was getting ready to go on R&R, but he didn't have any money because he couldn't change his money. And he was walking, and he walked by the general, and the general said, "Don't you salute officers?" He turned around and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," He said, "But I got a problem." He said, "What's your problem?" He said, "I got my money for R&R, but I can't change it because I was in the field." He said, "What do you mean you can't change it?" He said, "Give it here." He went into finance and said, "I found this money in my desk. What can I do?" And well, of course, he was "Oh, we'll take care of you, General." Oh, not a good move. He got the guy's money and he sent him on R&R, and then he sort of got rid of the finance officer. He said, you don't ever do that. These are my troops, and you got a problem with them, and you get hold of their commanders and find out why he couldn't change his money. So, you know, there was things that sort of aggravated me over there. We were getting 90 cents on the dollar on their money, while it was on the world market, it was about 1,500 per dollar. And they played games with the money over there. So, but we don't want to talk about that. That's all political crap.
How did you first get involved with Colonel or General Bolling?
How I first became my brigade commander.
Okay.
Yeah.
You skipped that part, so tell me about how that happened.
Oh no, I was the third brigade. Well, first of all, I had recon platoon first 05. Then they sent me to Fort, what the hell's the name of that place? It was in Missouri. There's an army post in Missouri. I'll tell you the name in a minute. I got a little bit of dementia here. To recruit paratroopers. And while I was there, Special Forces turned around and said, well, you're there, see if you get some guys that want to volunteer for Special Forces. And that's what I did for 6 months, and then I came back to Fort Bragg. And the colonel that was in charge of the guy named George Viney, he was he commanded the brigade. I knew him well. He was a good guy. And then we got a colonel that came in, I won't mention his name, because he made a remark and the general relieved him. Then all of a sudden, we had a lieutenant colonel, he was a good, smart guy, real good. He took over the brigade temporarily until General Bolling got there, or Colonel Bolling got there, and he took over the brigade. And there was all a new band, the whole thing was a new, every time a new brigade commander changes, of course, everything changes, personalities and everything else in the brigade. And he ran a good brigade, and he was a good golfer. He played golf a lot, but he still, we did a lot of things together. We did Detroit, the riots in Detroit. We jumped into Puerto Rico, Villegas Island. That was a good one. Anyway, yeah, are you familiar with any of these places? You know, Villegas, it's all big mountains, not mountains, but big hills. And we had you know what a scrap hanger is? We used to get colonels every so often. We were going to go outside the country and we'd jump. We get a colonel from Washington, D.C., from the Pentagon. He wanted to get a jump with us, so we jumped into Villegas, and this colonel, he jumped out in the plane, and we had, because of the ocean, we had Mae West, plus we had shock repellent with the pull, and we were standing there. I was intel sergeant for the brigade, and this guy, this colonel come down, and then the old man, everybody's standing there watching him. He comes down there, and he's got there, and all of a sudden, his feet hit, and he pulled Mae West, and he blew up, and he pulled a shock or something. He should have opened his eyes up. He'd probably found out he was in the middle of a field. Oh, God damn it, that was a good time. Yeah, but the Detroit thing.
So this is during the race riots in Detroit.
Yeah, we pulled into there at night. That was a political thing, but Lyndon Johnson, the governor of Michigan, they had a big. But normally they wouldn't do that, but they moved us in there. When we got there, the National Guard was driving around in tanks, and it looked. People, it's kind of hard to explain, but the city looked like it was done with a bombing raid. I mean, the buildings were burnt out, there were shells, but the night we got there, we were taken by bus from the airport and brought to a school. And we went up, got into the school, all the lights were all out, and the old man comes in there and he...
Who's the old man?
Bud Bolling,
okay.
General Bolling. He was colonel then. He said, what the hell, where the hell are the lights? Somebody turned the lights. He tripped over somebody that was lying on the floor. And instead the guy said, no, don't turn those lights on, they're shooting at us. And Bolling said, turn the goddamn lights on. Somebody turned the lights on. All these cops are laying on the floor. And he's and there's big glass windows sitting there. He's where are they shooting? The guy says, he's down the hall, the inner office on the side of the building was 3 doors down in a corner, and there was a little, looks like a BB gun hit the window. And General says, put my CP in here, my staff, put it in. This was set up here, and that's what started. And the next day he said, he had the battalion commanders come in, he said, strip them and run them in the streets, PT. And he turned around, he said to me, he said, Sergeant Dewey, he says, I got a problem. I said, what's the matter? He said, my wife didn't pack any underwear. I need some underwear. And I said, I didn't even want to go there. I said, okay. He says, here's some money. So take my Jeep, go see if you can find me some underwear in the department store. I said, yes, sir. I said, I got him some underwear. The guy at the department store said, oh my God, you can have anything you want. Boy, they didn't want any more. They were having a real bad time. And so he took everything. Like I said, it was that one day, that was the end of that riot. There were some good things going on. The old man turned around, he said, well, they moved us to Chandler Park, and we set up in there. I've always had the idea that a good prankster is a good prankster. So we set up, and the guy from the 508, one of the intel sergeant over there said he was supposed to set up the 508 CP tent. And I said, get some rock salt. He said, what do you mean? He said, you got to call the engineers and get some rock salt. He said, what for? I said, you got to put it on the ground here because they got canvas therms. He said, what the hell is a canvas therm? I said, these little worms that if your canvas is on the ground, the worms will go up and eat the canvas. They'll eat your tents up and all that. He said, you're joking. I said, no. Okay. So anyway, the 508 commander was, at that particular time, I'm pretty sure it was still the same guy. He was a German. He was American, but he came from Germany. And he wanted to know why his tent wasn't up. The sergeant said, well, I'm waiting for the engineers to get me some rock salt. And he said, what for? He said, canvas therms. He said, why, you stupid or something? What do you mean? There's no such thing. Oh, at that time, man, he come looking for me. Oh, that was something else. Oh, my God. Oh, the old man said, you got to stop that. Anyway, make a long story short, we got overrun that night. About, I figured, from 3 directions on that Chandler part, they had women. They overran us. He came out and said, what the heck is going on? I said, I don't know, sir, but the place is full of women. He said, get them out of here. Oh, that was something.
And what were you doing with Colonel Bolling that time? What was your position?
I was assistant intel sergeant.
Over in the hospitality room when you want me.
I was the assistant intel sergeant there. But I was actually, at that particular time, I was an S2. They didn't have an officer, so I took the S2 over. So, and I was the intel officer for temporarily there because they didn't have any officers for us. And he did well. The department, the Secretary of the Army came, and the division commander was that was his name, General. He was probably one of the better division commanders too. He came over, and they had a big briefing with the old man, and they said he did a good job and all that stuff there. And he said, pack up, we began, guys will be flying out of here the next night. They had, oh my God, there were some nice people, and they did a lot of things for us in Detroit, but I'll never forget that night, the night of the overrun. So anyway, we flew back to Fort Bragg, And then we come on the alert. We jumped in. I got hurt on a parachute jump. It doesn't make a difference. But the thing was, he made me go. He made me go up to the hospital and take some X-rays of my back and all. I said, "You got to go up there." And I took some pictures of backs, and I came back down there. And he said, "What did they say?" I said, "Well, he says apparently I pulled some muscles and stuff, and I stretched my back a little bit further than I should have." And he said, "It's in the book, by the way." And I said, no big deal, sir." I said, "I'm still here for duty." So then I got a call, and he said, this sometime later, he called me. They got a call from the brigade, said, "You'll meet me at the division headquarters." And we had already started. We already been put on alert to go to Korea to get that stupid boat the guy lost. And he says, because I filled in the hotel officer, and I went down there and I met him outside division headquarters, and he said, and I went upstairs. He said, stay with me. Went upstairs, and they handed me the packet, and all of a sudden I seen that dragon on the front, and that wasn't Korea. That was Vietnam again, and that was Tet was going. And he said, we sat in there, we got briefed. Then he says, you know, they want to prepare a movement order. And I went down and wrote a movement order, the S2 section of it, because that's not too much, because at that particular time, the only thing I had to do was to find out where we were going and get the enemy situation in that. And then I used to clear, when the people left the building headquarters, I used to clear all the officers, make sure there was nothing left, nothing classified left around there, and what we needed. So then I was on that first airplane flying out. My wife was a school bus driver, and she had already gone from the house, and I went back to the house, picked up my stuff, and wrote a note saying, "I'll see you when I get back." And that was, we did a couple of those in my life. So anyway, make a long story short, that's all right. I turned around and they said, well, then we flew into Vietnam, and that was the first plane to hit the ground.
Were you on that plane?
Oh yeah, I was.
And
I stayed right with him. Yep.
You were with Colonel Bolling.
Yep, I stayed right with him. Yeah, they did.
And he took the first step?
Sir?
Did he take the first step off?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there's some stupid Marine come running out there saying, "Oh God, they're rocketing us. Who are you people?" So we come over to stop the war. Guys, you people are crazy, man. Get this plane out of here. That's why there's 4,000 people coming right behind me. So, and the old man, he went up, General Costa come down and got with the old man, and they took him up and they briefed him the situation and got ready to take in, to billet 4,000 goddamn guys. And the plane started landing in. We started it was funny because the Americal was going to brief us, and the brigade was a very interesting brigade, because everybody, 98% of the brigade, had already had 1 and 2 tours of Vietnam, and that's what made it interesting. Nobody knew that, so when they lined up everybody as they come in to brief them on the in-country briefings, they first say, "Okay, all the people who've been to Vietnam, step off to the side." The 2 guys standing there by themselves, and they said, "Whoa!" So they said, "Who hasn't been to Vietnam?" They get a show of hands. Then they took them. I think it was maybe 100 guys out of the whole thing that had never been. My whole group of guys were all ex-Vietnam. One guy, he just got off a 30-day leave. He just got back. And
had to go right back.
Yeah. Well, he unfortunately he got killed over there, and but he was a good guy. I had a lot of fun with him. When we were moving north, General Bassani was the 101st commander, and he had a rule: only thing coming up there was beans and bullets, beans, bodies, and bullets. That's what they wanted up in I Corps, and. But we imagined if we fill up a couple of foot lockers full of liquor, because, I mean, you need rations. I mean, that's important. So we had a couple of scars, bourbon, none of the other silly stuff, just good stuff. And he was a good guy. He got shot by accident and he died. And that was something that General Bolling really didn't. Boy, Jesus, he would get mad. He could understand a combat death. He didn't like him, but he could understand him. But accidents, no siree. He didn't put up with that. So, anyway, but my relationships with him, he was more like a damn father to me. I never had one. So anyway, make a long story short, he was a good guy. He was just, anytime he needed something, him and I used to get in arguments. But it was private arguments. He would say something. He said to me, I said, they're going to build a chapel here. Where you want it, sir? He said, what do you mean, where do I want it? He says, what's the highest point in our area? And he said, build it up there. I don't think the choppers were very happy, but they built a chapel on top of a ridge. That was the highest point in the brigade. And we had some... And he said, then we had a situation where a kid had wrote a letter, not a letter, but he had an envelope, and he was asking people how much it cost to send the envelope to China. And he had it addressed to Mao Tse-tung, and what it was a Choi Hoi slip, which is we dropped them all over Vietnam and to the VC, and what it did was they would tell them, if you come into us, we will give you some money, we'll give you some land, and we'll take care of you. And nobody would say anything to the kid. And finally the homie said, what the hell am I going? I said, for Christ's sake, bring him in and just say, what's in the envelope? And the kid just opened the envelope and pulled out the choice. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Lord.
What was the reaction of...
Oh, the old man thought that was funny. He says, all of that. He says, everybody running around here in a panic. So that was something else. Then we had some really colorful officers. A lot of Special Forces guys, ex-Special Forces guys. And the first sergeant in the headquarters company was an ex-SF master sergeant. And we ate Spam, and they did wonders with Spam. I could really believe, you could close your eyes and almost think you're eating prime rib. Yeah, right. The cans of Spam, the big cans, and they just slice them up. They baked it, they fried it, they cooked it, they barbecued it. You name it, they did it. And so I figured, what the hell? We had a thing going, and we got some steaks. We got a hold of some steaks, and I had a T-bone. We had a grill going, and so we grilled the T-bone. And I had a bottle of bourbon, and I went down there and knocked on the old man's tent. He didn't have a house. He had a tent, and he said, "Yeah." I says, "I got something for you. You probably need this." And he said, "Oh, God damn it!" I took the top off the thing. He said, "Oh," he said, "I'm not even going to ask where it came from." I said, "Probably gonna wash it down with this." And that's why I took care of him. He was just great. But him and I, we had indifferences. He accused me of telling him what to do. One time, I said, "I didn't tell you what to do. I suggested it." He said, "No, goddamn it, you told me what to do." And he says, "Only two people who told me what to do. It's the Command General of the Down First and my wife. That's the only two people." And I said, "Well, sir," I says, "I'll tell you what." I says, "If you think that I told you, I made him." I didn't make him. I said we were having a battle. It's called a Lazy W, and at a well, and he had been up quite a long time, and we were in the 505 fire base, and they had a room in there with a bed, a cot, and I said, "Sir," I said, "why don't you go, take a break and go down, lay down, and if anything happens, I'll be the first one to wake you up, sir." And he said, "What'd you say?" I said, "You ought to take a rest because, you can think better on your feet." He said, God damn it. He walked in the room and slammed the door behind him. He came out there a little while later. What's going on? I said, it's pretty much over. There was no more after you laid down. There was no more action up there. And, you know, so he says, let's take a walk. He said, you know, you'll ever tell me what I'm going to do. He said, there's a difference between an E7 and a general. He said, I'm going to tell you something. Don't you ever tell me what to do. I said, yes, sir. That's when we had that discussion. I said, I didn't tell you, I just made a suggestion that you should lay down. No, you told me. And we were arguing. And he turned around there. And so anyway, the helicopters come in, we got to break down the talk. It was what they call a moving talk, a jump talk. We broke all the maps and everything down, closed up, loaded on a helicopter. I went in there and said, hey, General, I said, you got to get on a helicopter, sir. He said, because that helicopter's moving out of here. He said, you see, you're telling me again. You tell me, ask me to get on the helicopter. I said, sir, would you please get on the helicopter? And he flew back up to the brigade headquarters. So he was quite the gentleman. I really liked him. Everybody did. He was a general. He was a general that took care of his people. Finally, we got hit one night. We didn't. 101st did, but we happened to be. Our brigade was out a little bit from them, in a place called Rodriguez. Well, middle of the night, all holy hell broke loose. They started rocketing the place, and then next thing, a ground attack from a colonel named Mott, M-O-T-T. And they come in between the 508 and that second brigade of the 101st. Well, it was really interesting. And, I didn't, never even thought about this. It was brought up in one of the other meetings we had last year. And the old man was down there, and I asked, I went in to talk, and I said, where the hell's the old man? And everybody's sitting in there, because, this stuff was flying all over the place. So I went down his tent, because, and I said, young sir, you got to find. I said, who's there? I said, Sergeant Dewey. Oh, yeah. He said, what's up? I said, you got to get out of here. Get in the talk where it's safe. And I brought him up in there. I never made payments. There was some kid mentioned it to me. He said, you're the guy who went down and got the old man and got him out of this tent and brought him in, took him up into the talk. And I said, oh, yeah, but that's nothing. That's I guess everybody was, when they start dropping rockets on you, then all of a sudden, and the artillery people are firing back. They're standing outside shooting a guy, counter battery. And like I said, we had, him and I were good friends. I gotta say that. I don't care what anybody says. Not that I could have got away with anything that illegal, but but he did say when Barsani came by, said somebody broke into his mess, stole all his steaks. He said, stole my steaks and my ice cream. He said, I didn't care about the steaks, but I did care about the ice cream. And all of a sudden he left, and the general said, I have no idea, he said, well, okay, he said, couldn't get past me any of our people. we're like princes. So he went out there, he called me in. He said, General Barsani just left, and he was missing a lot of steaks and ice cream. I said, yes, sir. He said, how come I didn't get any ice cream? I said, sir, we had to get that to the MPs in order to get into it is such a, the general officers, they have their own little thing, especially, the division commanders and stuff. And he said, oh, he said, okay. I said, watch your step. I said, sure. When we first left Chulai, came up to where we were in Icod, Rodriguez, he walked out there one day and we were standing. He said, he says, I didn't realize this brigade had this much equipment. I said, we don't. He said, what? I said, don't worry about it, sir. we requisitioned a lot of stuff before we left the American Division. Everybody had a tent. I mean, a real tent. Oh man, it was anything we could. We had generators. We had 3 740 horsepower generators that ran all electricity there. One day the CID showed up. We ended up with a 3.5 generator to run the torque. They took all the generators back to where they got stolen from. I tell you what, it was a great brigade. Great guys, a lot of fun. The ups and downs and all that sort of stuff. But and then when he left. We were in Red Ball. We were down there. We set into Red Ball, and the next thing I know, I was doing sensors then for the S2, putting sensors in the ground. They were supposed to be dropped by airplanes, but the Air Force had one of these brain farts, and they turned around, and we were hand dropping them out of helicopters, and we would mark them on a map where they were, and the old man's bird come in, and the Red Ball sat down, and the pilots were tired, and the guy, when they started to go out, take the helicopter, they didn't leave it there. They flew it over to Tonsanuk. But when they went to go out, one of the crew chiefs was flying it, and one of the blades just hit the edge, just greased the side of one of the buildings there. And of course, that set it off and it went down. Everybody got out of it. And you ever see a helicopter burn? Huey, everything's magnesium, and it just melts. Everything, and it just, all of a sudden, it just, poof, it's like a big puff, and it just burns, because everything, all the radios and everything else in it burns right with it. And but the pilots, they were just whipped. They just couldn't find them more. But just about everybody, I never understood why they made officers, to fly helicopters when they could have sergeants doing the same thing. The Marine Corps they still had enlisted pilots. They were flying C-130s. So, and but the other thing is, the old man when he left, he made me go on R&R. Told me I had to go on R&R. Sergeant Major came down and said, General says you got to go on R&R. I said, I don't want to go on R&R. He says, you don't seem to understand it. General said you got to go in. He told me that to put you in his staff car and get you in to the airport and put you on a plane, and you're going on R&R. Do you understand that? I said, yes, sir. So I went on R&R. And then when I came back, he left, and General what's his name? Dickerson. He came in, and it was, I was sort of told, don't, because I used to take care of the old man. He says, stay away from Dickerson's not the same kind of animal, so you got to be careful. You don't want to fool around. So they sent me up to Fuloy, and I spent, 2-3 months up there, and that was it. And I went home. And then the old man went to train. Actually, what I did is I went to another assignment over to Mac Sog, and for the sensors, because that was my specialty. And he said, and I went in there, and the colonel at Mac Sog was a good friend of mine from Germany. He was a captain in Germany, and he was a full colonel then. And he turned around and says, if you come over, we'll make you a master sergeant. And I said, well, yeah, because the old man said to me, the last stripe they put on me, he says, you better hold on to these, because I'm going to tell you what, he says, with this new promotion system in Washington, D.C., with the Board of Officers and all that, he says, you don't have the most sterling record in the Army. He says, so you just go on what you got. So I figured they get a master sergeant. I figured I'd make master sergeant, and then Special Forces is a whole different type organization, and I would have probably gone right up to sergeant major. But Colonel Hayes said to me, he said, "Who's General Bolling?" I said, "That was my boss here at the 82nd, sir." He said, "Well," he says, "it's funny." He said, you are to leave Vietnam tonight. First transport out of here. Or I leave in the morning, and I like my job, and I'm not going to leave, so you're leaving tonight." And that's when, what's the name? There was 4 of us that left on that plane. And we had all the cases, all the stuff that they captured in a big, big case in the middle of that plane. And we flew to Dover from Vietnam. Of course, we stopped in a number of places. We got into Dover, and they switched all of that cargo over into another plane, East Coast, and they had a colonel, Air Force colonel on board. They have a plane that flies along the East Coast that goes every day, and it's a shuttle, and they get down to Mississippi. Well, we were flying out, and they said that the pilots come back and said something to the colonel. The colonel said, "Outrageous! No, I'm not. No, you forget that. And we're not landing at Pope Field." And the pilot says, "Sir," he says, "if you want to talk to the general on the ground and tell him you don't want to land, I suggest you change your name before you talk to him. But I've been ordered down at Pope Field." So we landed at Pope, and we had that big case for the museum, and they took pictures. I don't know what the hell the pictures went to, but the Community General Division was there. Sykes, that's who it was, Sykes, and he was a good general too. And I went home. They drove me home in Jeep, and I got, and then, but we don't know where all of that stuff went. It disappeared. So anyway, what else you got?
When you were with Colonel Bolling, General Bolling, did you go out in the field?
Yeah, I went to the field. Once in a while, like I said, we would jump talk. He flew, the sergeant major we had, he never flew with the old man. The second sergeant major we had flew with him once, and he was in a plane, and he had a revolver. And he got out, and his harness caught, and the revolver caught, and he got shot in the leg. And then we got another sergeant major. I'm trying to think of who the hell that was. We went through sergeant majors who were pretty good over there. He was the one, I think, I'm trying to figure his name. But, that's who it was, Thomason. Sergeant major, that's the one that said I had to go on an hour and a half. And he come back. Most of the staff we had were all ex-SF people, and that helped out a lot. The general had, it wasn't Max Sog then, it was, they had a Delta project over there, and he was involved in that in a previous tour that I was told. And that's what made it, he knew the country pretty good, and what he went. He spoke fluent Portuguese. We jumped into Viegas, which is a Portuguese island. It belongs to Puerto Rico, but they spoke Portuguese. And then he went in, and all of a sudden, I don't know what the hell the name of there's the countries in South America. He was there in the embassy that took care of that. He was down there, and he stayed there for a while.
And who's this? Who stayed down there?
General Bolling.
Okay.
Yeah, he spoke fluent Portuguese, and I speak up in other languages, and so that's where he went. And then I went, like I said, I went back to the 82nd, and then I was assigned to the Ranger Department in Fort Benning, and all of a sudden I was called up into the headquarters, and I was only home 4 days. I called up in the headquarters, and the Colonel Grange, who started the regiment, the Ranger Regiment, he was the chief of staff of the division. And he says, him and I knew him, he was a captain in in Germany. And he said to me, he said, "Hey, Sergeant Dewey," says, "your orders have changed. You're going to go to Norwich University in Vermont." And I said, to do what? He says, you're going to teach skiing up there and mountaineering. I said, I haven't been on skis in 8 years, sir. He's just like a bicycle. Once you're on them, you can, you're right. So anyway, that's how I wound up in Norwich. So, and then the old man came back to the United States. I wrote him a letter, and he took over Fort Lewis as the I think the division commander. I don't know what unit was out there, but he was going to take the post, and he was going to be division commander. And I wrote him a letter. I said, what you need is a brilliant aide, listed aide. And he said, no. Yeah, I got the letter at home. He said, there's no room for two commanders here. You understand? you just stay at Norwich University and you'll be happy. And I said, yes, sir. So, but when I got orders in '72 to go back to Vietnam, he got involved in that. He was working for Westmoreland in Washington then as manpower, assistant chief of staff of manpower, and he got involved. I guess he got into an argument with Westmoreland, and because that had been my third tour, 2 extensions. So he said, and he won. He won, and I wasn't aware of that, but some brigadier general called me at my house in Northfield, Vermont, and he said, "Who am I speaking to?" I said, "Says this is General so and so." Of course, you know. I said, "Yeah. What the hell do you want?" And he says, "You know who I am? I'm General Westmoreland's aide." I said, "Quit the crap, pal. What do you want?" I said, "Yeah, it could be anybody." And they were busting my tail anyway because I was going back. He said, "You're going to go back to Vietnam if I personally had to fly you back to Vietnam." I said, "Okay, what are you talking about? What makes you think that," he said, "you have started so much trouble." The commander of Norwich University was a 4-star general, was the ex-chief of staff of the Army, Barksdale Hamlet. And he got upset because I had a program going there that was really bringing in cadets. And he didn't want that to go away. And he said, he asked Westmoreland, is there, and then the governor of New Hampshire, who was the ski patrol guy, Sununu, he was he went in and seen, I guess they wrote, and this is all done beyond me. And so so finally somebody said, yeah, my wife got upset. She was going to call the president. She says, this is bullshit because I've been here so many times there. So I said, no, I'll leave it be. I'll be all right. Don't worry about it. So one thing my wife and I never did say we never said goodbye. And just before she died, that night, she said goodbye. That was scary. So, well, that's about it in a nutshell.
And when you went back to Vietnam, that was for the missing in action?
No, I went back there for special operations. FANK, Field Army Command. It was a special operation unit. It was all over. It's quite big. We were training Cambodians. Unfortunately, I ran into a major in MacV that decided he was going to put me in the Harvard Airborne Division. And I had orders direct from, not from personnel. I had orders direct from out of Washington, Chief of Staff, and telling me I was going to go to FANK, and I was going to work for a general there. And so they put me in the Harvard Airborne Division. I waited. I talked to the colonel in charge of the senior advisor. I says, I'm not supposed to be here. He says, Sergeant, he said, I could really use it. I said, sir, I agree with you, but I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be working. I'm trying to think of his name. He was a 2-star general. He was in charge of all the special activities that were going on. And what happens here in Special Forces, we become, nobody knows we're there. Even they lock down all of the records. They pull the records and they lock them down. And there's like a lot of guys didn't get promoted because of that, because they didn't exist. We didn't exist in the country. And what we were doing was we were training military training teams We had military training come from Okinawa. They come in there. Security training teams. We ran, or we were running patrols out of logticians out of Benoit. We went down to Phuc Tui, Long Hai, down on the coast. Those were special forces camps where they were training Cambodians. We had 60 battalions of them up in, I want to say Dong Baten. That was outside. And, boy, you want to talk about a scramble in. That was something. All of a sudden, the Vietnamese, they were doing 100-plane arc lights in North Vietnam. And that they had the North Vietnamese were on their knees. All they wanted to do was stop the war. They couldn't take any more. And that's what Jacques, he said, why did you all of a sudden quit? He said, you had us beat. But that's way out of my thing. But anyway, make a long story short, that's what happened. And the next thing I know, here we are. We're sitting in Benoit, and the guy says to me, and my boss was a guy named Vincent Lang, and he said, Duke, he said, we're going to go to Thailand to do a JCRC, have a headquarters, General Kingston's going to run. I said, sir, I don't know. I says, I just told my wife that I'd be home, in about a week, and called. Oh, it was nice over there. You could pick up a phone, and we didn't have to go through all these radios. You just pick a phone up and call direct right to the States. And I called my wife and said, I'll be home in about 6 days. Oh, okay. I said, get that guy out of the house. Make sure the closets are clean. And she, yeah. So anyway, she said, then I had I picked the phone up and I called. And she said, oh, where you going? I said, I'm going to go to Thailand. She said, all right. That was the end of that. That was a very short conversation. So I moved into JCRC, Thailand, and that was quite interesting. It was, we got very political, and I started really get turned off, and that was it. I didn't want no more to do with it. You'd have to read the peace accord between the Vietnamese. We were supposed to have a unit, JCRC unit, in Vietnam. We were going to be based in there, and we would be all our missions going looking for MIAs, and I was still an intel sergeant. I was an assistant operations sergeant for the headquarters, and it was a joint service headquarters. It was Marines, Navy, all that sort of thing, Air Force. And the ambassador to Vietnam, he come in there and he put us in a big theater in NKP, non-confidant Thailand, a big air base up there. He put us in a theater and locked the doors down. And he told us exactly what he felt about us being there and going back in the country. And it was not nice. And I really don't like that guy. I'm not going to mention his name. They know who he is. He was the hero of Saigon, putting all the people on the helicopters on top of the embassy there. Son of a bitch, excuse my French. That turned me off. That was it. That just, he didn't care if there was MIAs walking down the goddamn streets of Saigon. We were not going to go back in that country. But then he didn't have much choice because a couple of congressmen come over investigating why. Then they had, what's the name, the guy from Special Forces. He did the raid on there in, that was his name. He was a colonel. He did a raid up there in North Vietnam to get the prison POWs out. He came over there for the family. The family hired him to find out what was going on. I was in the intel business, and we were supposed to be drawing any intel from Southeast Asia, but I still had an intel net set up over there. And I used to get all the news back. We had pictures that were taken from the SR-17s. We had pictures taken of POW camps up in Laos that had Americans in them. And I've got some of them still at home. And But you can erase all this stuff out of here, because that's why I say sometimes I got really upset. I wouldn't want to do with anything. I said, I'm getting out. That's the end of it. I went back to the 10th, and then I had a run-in with their commander, the 10th Group commander. He was we had a couple of people. Special Forces had a bunch of people that you could always tell they were in there for a ticket punch. And he was looking for, to go from colonel to general, and there was the 82nd, that was a different group. When they were brigade commanders, then they had a shot at becoming a commanding general of the division, or assistant division commanders, and then if they made the commanding general of the division, they normally went to 18th Airborne Corps as a corps commander. That's the way it usually worked there. But this, that's what made me run sour. So I went home, and I went in and see my first sergeant. The colonel and I got into it, and I said, I went out to see first. I said, the first sergeant I knew him for 20 years. I said, give me my retirement papers. I want out of here. And he said, what the hell happened? I said, I told him what happened. And he said, hate to see you go, but I said, sayonara. So I went, that's when I said, go home, come in once a month, check in to make sure I know you're alive till you run out of your retirement. So yes, sir. So that was it. And that was the end of my Army career. Well, I can't say that, because then I went in the New York Guard. I don't know how I went in there, but we made a deal. I always wanted to be an officer, so they made me a lieutenant. When I was commandant of cadets at Norge, I was a major in the militia, National Guard in Vermont. And then they promoted me in New York to lieutenant colonel. And I asked about that, and that's illegal. The governor has the right to promote what he wanted, so I was a lieutenant colonel. I used to tell a young man, we used to come to the different the divisions, the reviews and all, and I said, you ain't gonna believe this. He said, what? I said, I finally become an officer. I asked him once to go to, to get a direct commission, and he said, no. Yeah. He said, I'd keep you as a company commander quickly. I want to go as a direct commission as a captain. He said, but that's not the way the Army works. What the Army does, he says, they might make you might put in for a captain, but they might make you a lieutenant. And then you're going to work for somebody that knows not near as much as you know. And that's going to be a problem. And when after the war, they're going to rift. And you're going to be first on the rift list. So I said, what else? He said, you want to be a warrant? I'll make you a warrant. I said, can I stay with the brigade? He said, no. And I said, I don't want to stay with my brigade. That's my regiment. So that's the way it was.
Well, it looks like, or it sounds like, General Bolling definitely looked after you.
Oh, yeah.
Put you on that plane back home.
Yeah.
Always there.
Yeah, he was quite the guy. Him and I don't know, like I said, I have no idea why he picked me. Because, boy, like you said, you haven't got the most sterling record in the Army.
Well, we saw something in you, that's for sure.
When we didn't have people that could do aerial photos, I did them. I was good at what I did. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't let me in the Intel Corps because I got a letter saying that there was a question of my loyalty to the United States. I give it to the old man, and he said, you're joking. And I said, that's it. I said, I've been called a lot of things, but that's one thing that's how do you tell paratroopers that they're not loyal to the country? I mean, any other place you might find them, like those little creeps that got running around, living in that one guy that became a woman. What the hell was his name? Gave all his secrets away. It was a couple of years back there, and they threw him in a stockade, but they changed his sex. I said, son of a bitch. Of course, you don't want to hear on my mouth over there.
Well, you mentioned that you're really good at the aerial. What else were you really good at?
That's it. I knew the business. I trained the LURPs up with General Metaxas up in AP Hill in Virginia. We took all the lips from the 82nd, all of them, all the brigades.
Long range reconnaissance.
Patrols, yeah. Because back 1955, when I was in first command, that's what I did down with, we went down to Louisiana for sagebrush. That was one of my jobs. I was assistant instructor on LURPS and showed them how to use, to get the concept. They didn't have it then. It was just a concept. And the 18th Airborne Corps, that's who I worked for. And I was TDY, those people. And what they did was we showed them how to use pigeons. We used pigeons, carrier pigeons and all that stuff there. They used to drop them to us. And we so far penetrated, we could only, I don't know, were you an officer in the Army? Okay, you don't think much about the Army? Okay, the weaponry in the Army is to what you're talking about. A company commander in an infantry unit has 81 mortars. That was their influence. A battalion commander has artillery, that's a little bit more. A corps at that particular time had the surface-to-air missiles, that's their thing. But what they wanted was a corps needed to have forward observers, long-range patrol people. And we used to go there, we trained people who were all observers, and they can control, to pick out targets and stay up there and send back stuff through with different kinds of methods of, because radios are good, except they can pick up a radio. And they can, they can zero you in. Pigeons, they just fly back to where they come in. It felt like the First World War there for a while, they drop us a box with little pigeons in it, and then we go ahead and put what we had on there for targets, and then we fly, let them go, and they fly back home, and pigeons go back to where they came from their roost. So that was something. We did a lot of stuff. The Special Forces had their own goddamn submarine. that was something. They went down in Louisiana in their own submarine. And the 82nd Airborne, they made a big jump there. And the 325, they got, we were laughing, they got caught on the DZ. And what they did was they broke into our headquarters down there, and they found where the 325 regiment was going to land, and they set up ambushes all the way around the DZ, and they captured the 325, which was a guy named Colonel Pollock. He was the regimental commander. Oh, he got really upset. Who did I run into in Germany? In the 10th group, Colonel Pollock was the 10th commander. Special Forces commander. So but he was a pretty good guy too. So
I just have a couple more questions for you. What was your first combat experience like? First time, the quote-unquote baptism under fire. What was that like for you?
I was in Korea. We pulled up into an ammunition dump, me and another guy. And this is when I first got there, and they thought it was an MP or something. And the guy sitting in the seat, the guy opened up with a carbine. It was about that long. He cut it down. They were robbing the ammunition dump. It was a Korean, and he lit that Jeep up, killed the guy next to me. And I thought it happened so fast. And that's the first time I ever really had people fire at me. And I returned the fire, and I killed that son of a bitch. And but I turned around, and the guy in the Jeep, I shook him, and he just fell out of the other side of the Jeep. And I said, oh man, because you can see where the bullet holes went through the windshield. But I never thought, he was just still sitting there. And but anyway, that was my first time. As far as the combat, I got into, in '63, I walked into an ambush. Actually, you can't call it an ambush, it was an artillery ambush. We walked in, and all of a sudden, we were on patrol way up near the Laotian border. And there was, we'd been out longer, we ran out of food and everything, and that was an issue over there too. We didn't have any, they just couldn't put a helicopter in the air and just fly us food or something like that for resupply. we were eating the dry rice. The mountain yards used to grow dry rice on the side of the mountain. They didn't use rice paddies. It was raw. It was, it was really raw rice. And, that's what we were eating. And every so often we'd kill a monkey or something. The guys we had with us, the Nungs, they'd go kill a monkey or something, cut up a monkey, and we'd have monkey meat. But that was it. Well, we got stuck up in the valley, just above the Yasha Valley, and that was exciting. Boy, I tell you what, that high angle fire is a whole different ballpark. We come to find out, we were in the middle of the headquarters for all of Vietnam. Now, they were living in caves. Now we're talking about some Frenchman went over there after the war, and he found these beautiful waterfalls inside, fresh water and beautiful caves. That's where we were, and we found boxes and boxes of paperwork, letters from different merchants to VC, so where they could go in and get them food and stuff like that, and all these there were boxes of intelligence, pictures and all that stuff, and there was the whole army thing. The ASA put a bunch of people up. Our folks, the ASA, if Westmoreland was alive, he'd have me court-martial right now for that statement, because they didn't exist. But they put people up there to listen, because we got jammed. My radios got jammed, and but that was an afternoon, boy. We got one guy wounded. I got 2 guys killed in the little strike force. People walking around with their head in their ass, and first round hit the ground. They took out 2 guys, a couple of guys lost arms and stuff like that for artillery. And my commo guy, good name Smith, he got hit, but he got hit. I have, of course, when you work with Special Forces, you always have a medic running with you, especially when you're going deep patrols. And we had a medic. And Jackson, he kept Smith alive. And then all of a sudden I got on the radio, said, we got a problem. General, what the hell's his name? My name's the guy in charge of Special Forces. He was a Saigon Center commander. He was in Saigon, and he gave an order, all the Americans off the ground. And I said, well, they can't leave the people here. And they said, then the pilot in the helicopter says, get in the goddamn helicopter. We got a guy down there, General, saying, you get off the ground. So I jumped in the plane, left the strike force. Then right after we left, then the ships came in and picked them up and got them out of there. But I always wondered, that was General Yarborough, that was his name. And but Smith, he come out of it. They took him, put him in the hospital, and patched him up. He had some pretty good in his head. He was a ex-priest. Well, he didn't take the last order, 40 orders. He went all the way through, and then he quit. And he wanted to do some excitement, I guess. He joined Special Forces. That's what most of what we had were guys who really want to go right out to the edge of the envelope. So he got hit, and then they put this out. We went in, and what aggravated me was we had asked on 3 different occasions, send a helicopter. We weren't supposed to be there. We just, we had ran out and we were gone. I relieved the patrol that was in there because they had to go home, and we relieved them. We just stayed there, and that's the first, and that was exciting, I'll tell you. But then we were in a place called Buitu in I-Corps, and there was a French fortification. And I'll tell you, the French were great with landmines. They put them everywhere. And I don't think anybody ever kept track of them. But we had a guy in that camp walk down through there, not one of my guys. This is another guy on another team. He walked down and would take one step out of the path, stepped on a mine, killed him. That's inside the wire. So And then we get this order from MACV, go in and dig up all the mines. And oh, Jesus. I don't think so. We had a team leader he was a strange guy. He said no. And then just by luck, we were told we were being moved to build a camp up near Kam Duc. We were going to build a new camp on an airfield. So anyway, that was, and we got into a couple of good firefights. And but after that artillery thing, everything was down the street. There was nothing. They opened up a couple of times on us, but it's small arms is a whole different sort of thing. You can handle that, but artillery, oh man, we just couldn't handle it, man. They came in later on with helicopters, and they strafed. They pretty much knew where they were, and because the VC were good mortars guys. Them guys could drop a mortar in your back pocket, but they couldn't shoot. The NBA, they were crack shots. Most of their kills were all headshots, and that was. And then we worked mostly in Kam Duc. We built a camp there, so biggest camp in the country, and then it became a launch site after I left. Then I'll tell you how well we built it. The only way to get rid of it, they had to drop a B-52 strike on it. That was how good it was.
Wow.
We put that thing underground, and anyway, so. But yeah, I was scared. Oh man, that mortar's cut, and when Smith got hit, Jackson grabbed Smith, and he was walking up the hill and he got hit. Shrapnel, and the nose jumped on top of me, and Jackson kid said, "Duke, you gotta help me, you gotta help me." And I said, you know, I was saying, "Oh Jesus, I kind of want to do this," and it froze just a minute. And I told him, "Get off of me, get off of me." And I went up and we dragged him up there, and we got him in behind between two big rocks. If they were going to drop a mortar on us, it would have had to been between the two rocks, because that's the only thing. And then that's when they called, we got a casualty here. We all had call signs like the Air Force has. Mine was Granite, and every one of us had it. They knew exactly who they were talking to. So anyway, that was the first time. It was my ass was tight. You couldn't have drove a straight pen with a 10-pound sledge, I tell you.
Well, on that topic, you heard of the phrase "war is hell," right?
Oh yeah.
You agree with that?
Yeah, it's not a nice place. It has its ups and downs. I'll tell you a story, ups and downs, with General Bolling, another one. I saw a lieutenant a watch. It was a gold Seiko. It was a pretty sucker, man. It wasn't solid gold, but it was gold. Oh, it was beautiful. What a nice watch. And I sold him for $20 because he said, "That's a nice watch." And I said, "Yeah, I give you $20 for it." $20. That's a beautiful watch. He says, "Yeah, but it's gold color. It's not real gold." He said, "Yeah, I'll buy it." So a couple of days later, he come back and see me. He said, "There's something wrong with the watch." I said, "What's wrong with the watch?" He says, "It doesn't keep good time. It keeps falling back." Oh, I said, "Take a look at the watch. What does it say on the face of the watch? Where is it made?" Down the bottom it said, "Made in Japan." I said, "These are Japanese watches, and they keep Japanese time." And he said, "You're full of shit." And I said, No. These were such, special watches made. All you had to do is adjust the time in your mind of what it would normally be, and you're all right." Well, General Bolling called me and said, "I want to see you." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I got a lieutenant, West Point lieutenant, walking around saying he's got a watch that keeps Japanese time." He says, and I asked him where he got it. He said, "You sold it to him." He said, "Now I want you to go buy that watch back." And he said, "How much did he get?" I said, $20. He says, "You're going to buy it for $30. You understand? You get that watch from that lieutenant. I don't need my lieutenants walking around saying they got got a Japanese watch. They keep Japanese time." That's a true story, man. I tell you what. I got on a couple other lieutenants he had, and he called me in and told me to stand at attention. He said, you ever talk to one of my officers like that again, I'll put your ass out of the Army. I said, sir, I'm sorry. He said, I don't care. He said, you don't talk to my officers like that. And he said, I'll send that son of a bitch in here. He pulled a stunt, and he could have got a lot of people killed. And I jumped his ass in the talk. And that's why the old man found out about it. And he chewed my ass, because I wasn't completely immune to anything. And but I just he could have got a lot of people killed. And he made a mistake. We got an intelligence report of a battalion of PC moved up along the side of one of the companies in a 505, and he looked at the rating, F6, doesn't mean anything, baloney. I said, no, that's rating. You just call that battalion or that company and you tell them this is the intelligence got, and you let them decide if it's an F6. And he said, well, I said, and that's when I went off on him, and I shouldn't have done it. I guess I was out of line. They could have nailed my ass good for it. But I told him, yes, you're a real dumb son of a bitch. I said, I'm going to tell you what, don't you ever do that again. That's the same guy. I told him that he was playing when we first got in the country. He had a little puppy, and the puppies are puppies. They had pin teeth and everything. I told you, you hear that story out there? I said, all the dogs over here got rabies. And the next thing I see, he was leaning over in the dog, and I said, what's the matter with you? He says, you know what's the matter with me? And he picked up his shirt, and they had already taken 4 shots, a series in the stomach. They tried right through your abdomen, and they number them. So they know it's about 20 shots they get for rabies. And I said, what are you getting? You're the dog bitcher? He said, no, it was that puppy bit. I said, didn't anybody ever tell you that the puppy's got the dog doesn't get a rabies shot till it's 6 months because he's immune, because he got it from his mother? Oh, Jesus. I don't want to use his name, but everybody in there knows what I'm talking about. And he was something else. We got a new intel officer, a guy named Roy Davis. He was a great guy. He was just he was a real intel officer. He was branch intel. That's the first time we ever had one in the headquarters. And he come in there, and the old man was briefing them coming in, and they were in the meeting there. And he says, oh, by the way, he says, this is Major Roy Davis. He's a new intelligence officer. And then everybody was applauding. And he said that he's a real intel officer because he was a branch intel. And that was something real down at the brigade. But by that time, we were becoming a regular, separated regiment. And the old man turned around and he says, oh, by the way, Major, you'll be working for Sergeant Dewey. And the Major said, I don't work for Sergeant, sir. He said, everybody in the place cracked up. Because I pretty much run that ass too. And we had, and that was one of the incidents. He was a great guy though. Davis turned out to be really good. I used to have what they call fruit juice all the time. And I always had, these things you get in a hotel in a room, that's like a cooler. Well, mine was full of scotch and water. And I always had it on the desk. Because you work most of the time, for a little bit of sleep, but you work all the time. And Davis come over and said, come over and looked at me. He wanted his own office. We were in a tent, mind you. And I built a frame, and I got, these little frilly things you get down, like, waving through a door. We made him an office. He wanted to be in his office. So he came over there, says, what do you got to drink? And he grabbed the container, and he grabbed a cup, and he poured it in there. And he looked at it, took a drink, and said, now that's what I call good water. The old man came in the tent one day for a briefing, and told his aide, get me a drink. Come over to my desk, pour him a drink. And the old man sitting there, and he's drinking this. Didn't even bat an eye. He's just sitting there drinking it, and boy, he says, you got some good water there, Sergeant. I said, I don't have water like that. So we found a bottle of scotch for him. So.
Did anything from your experience from war impact you when you returned home?
No, I don't have that problem. No, I'm a soldier. That's what I do. I was young. I've been raised in orphanages. I was used to standing in lines. I used to sleeping and all that sort of thing. I says, no, it didn't bother me a bit. I only had one incident, and that was in Antigua. And it was a restraint, no, it was in Anguilla when I was in the Caribbean. I was in a light aircraft. I was going to take some pictures of an island off the coast. And when the plane turned, there was a lot of elephant grass on the end of the airfield, and it was really weird. And I seen the elephant grass blowing away from like it does when a helicopter, and that's the only incident. Then it just snapped me in, and then it was all over, and that was it. That's the only thing that ever threw me back into Vietnam.
It reminded you of Vietnam.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. And is there anything you'd like to add that I did not ask you?
Well, I tell you what, this is probably the best group of guys I've ever served with, without a doubt. These guys were good guys, and they were efficient. We pretty much, when we first closed in the country, and they were testing this and that and that, yeah, there were some people that really did, not enlisted-wise, officer-wise, company commanders, not company commanders, one or two company commanders that they were National Guard guys and stuff like that. We don't know where the hell we picked them. We picked up a lot of officers coming out of the country. We picked them up in California. The whole intel unit came out of there. And as we were going across the states, we were picking up units. And they would join us. And of course, that wasn't us. We were already in Vietnam. So we got a lot of people come in there, and it was something else. Half of the unit went up by truck, and half of it we flew up the night before. And what we did, flew by, we dug in, because that was the middle of Teton, and they were attacking all over the place. But we didn't have any problems. Oh, like a couple machine guns and stuff like that, little bitty stuff. But there was no, by that time, we were seasoned troops, so we didn't really worry about that. The road trip going up, some stupid Marine up in I-Corps cut loose at one of the units, and the old man had 105s on back of flatbeds. And as soon as he fired, just to, well, here's the new guys, we're going to, well, he fired a couple of rounds down there, and all of a sudden that 105 had a goddamn beehive in it, and boy, he fired right up in the woods, and his lieutenant come on out there yelling and screaming, no, they didn't hit anybody. But man, it's a lucky damn thing. And that's, we were serious people. They drove that whole convoy right all the way up. That night into Nane, they got hit, and then the next couple of days they moved up to Ivan Pass and moved into camp.
This was on Highway 1.
Yep. Yeah, but that was a one-way highway up there for a while. So
your heart lies with the Golden Brigade.
that's right. That's the greatest goddamn group of people I ever served with, and they were all good soldiers. They were very good soldiers, because we had a tremendous commander, and he just treated us everything. We had the night, I was going to tell you, the night that we got hit, there was side-looking airborne radar is SLA. Okay, on these Mohawks, they had a bar across the bar. They could look 25 miles to the side, and the rule was, if you picked up the emissions, because they had a box inside the airplane, and the pilot, when he was flying, that would be taking all what they seen on the ground, and it was radioing it back to his base. He picked up 21 emissions. If they pick up 3 emissions in one grid square, they're supposed to call a unit. He picked up 21 emissions, and I guess he had a hot date or something, and he flew back. And I got the thing the day after the attack on the S2, and the old man came in and said, what's going on. And we had the S2 was a guy named Johnson. He was an ex-SF officer. He was a good guy. He turned around and said, "Sir, you better read this." And the old man looked at that. Jesus, I thought he was going to go through the ceiling. He said, "I'll be a son of a bitch," because all he had to do, if they had called, we could have really cleaned that regiment out. We did. Subsequently, we planned them, me and a bunch of other people who started working, and we kept all of just normal traffic going over that area. And there was no action in there, no troops on the ground, but we knew there was a regiment in there. And all of a sudden, the 508, they hit that place, man. I tell you how fast they hit it. The guy had a cigarette in there, the Colonel, Mott, he had a cigarette in his cigarette case and all that, had his name on it and all that stuff, and he had a cigarette burning in the ashtray. That's how fast. And they got him out of there. But they just cleaned that 22nd Regiment's clock, and that was it. And that was a good operation. That was Operation Mott. It's in the history book. So,
One final question. Is there anything you would like to tell future generations?
well, when I was in New York Guard, I had a battalion up in New York, up in New York State. It was a shadow battalion. It didn't have anybody, just a staff, and that was it. Nobody. But we were in an armory, and what I did, I went around and I knew. I'm not clairvoyant. Don't get me wrong, but I have these things that all of a sudden I know what's going to happen. It doesn't. The old man, he kept me very close. I sat down and briefed him one time. I told him about what was going to happen in the future in I-Corps, and he used to sit there and smile, you know, say, "Oh, by Jesus, when I went back, that too, in I-Corps." But anyway, what I used to do is go around and talk to these young guys. So don't be afraid of war. War is a joke. It's brutal, it's bloody, and you can get killed. But if you trained right, and you train good, and you pay attention to what they teach you not to get killed. And then when you take that, somebody's going to die, but don't worry about it, because you're not going to die. If it's not your time, you're not going to die. So you just do your job, and you know, and that's what it is. And that's pretty much, you know, you take it for granted. That's what, like I say, paratroopers are like paratroopers. We're automatically surrounded when we parachute in. So we know that, and that's it. And if you can't think that way, if you can't think that way, then you got no business doing what we do. But these guys were good. Even the guys that came in that weren't parachutists, they came in and mixed well. We had a couple of incidents. One guy had jumped off the back of the truck and he pulled the trigger. He had a round in the chamber, and I want to tell you what, well, there was some talk over that one, I'll tell you. After that, they want to know what the hell they were telling them down in Benoit. When they were taking them in and they brief them down there, then they sent them north. And a couple of the guys got a little carried away with combat stories down there. And that's the last thing you want to do is scare these guys, because they're scared already. You know, young privates coming in there, they're scared. But you don't want to go ahead and start pulling their head full of bullshit, and then they start getting dangerous. So that was the other thing the general didn't. He could understand. He didn't like combat fatalities, but he wouldn't put up with anybody getting killed accidentally. That he got really upset with. And boy, you don't want to be on the end of one of those, boy, because I tell you what, he let people know very quickly. You know, you don't kill. We got enough problems, and you know, there was a lot of things that people, I don't think they quite understood. Back in the States, they didn't understand. A lot of us didn't want to be there anymore. When we first went over, we could have taken that country apart, no problem at all. But then all of a sudden, I started looking around, and it was a money thing. And the Vietnamese were, man, they were stealing everything they get their hands on. It wasn't like, you know, and they just knew it. They tried to kill a couple of our SF officers because they knew they were stealing. and they had to get rid of them, and they were afraid, you know, that they would put the word on somebody. We had Vietnamese officers walking into the club in Da Nang, and they would put $50, $60 worth of coins in a slot machine. And you sit there and you look at, how the hell is he doing that? Shadow battalions. They would have a whole shadow unit, and they were getting the money, the equipment, no people. So, anyway, I didn't want to hear that crap. But that was it. You know, you train them good, and you tell them. It's scary, but that's the war. And the only thing they're gonna be no more wars. The Congress took care of that. They don't have wars anymore, because if they declare a war, then they're subject to go play soldier, and that ain't the way Congress works. I'm not a very good politician, and I don't particularly like the Congress, and I don't want to get into that either. So they'll have the FBI looking for you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Duke. It's been an awesome experience and time sitting down with you, so thank you for speaking with me today, and thank you for everything you've done for our country.
Okay, thank you. God bless you.